Welcome to the Berkshires Gone By, history and folklore about the westernmost and most beautiful county in Massachusetts. I'm your host, Brooke. The Berkshires were carved by ancient ice eons ago. As the glaciers moved across the land and then melted away, they left countless interesting features in the area. Just part of what makes the Berkshires so magical. A type of formation that the glaciers left behind, which is particularly beautiful, are the gulches and glens. Tight spaces between mountains and on hidden hillsides where ice left huge boulder piles. These massive stones stacked high atop each other. There are many such places in the Berkshires, on both private and public land. Some known and others hidden away. These places seem to hold a sort of spirit of their own, a charged energy, and a timeless stillness. Today I'll talk about 3 such spots that you can visit. In the South County town of Great Barrington, southwest of Lake Buell, and a bit off the Appalachian Trail there, sits the beautiful Ice Gulch, once instead called Ice Gulch, and sometimes also called Ice Gorge. This place is hard to describe, but I'll try my best. Ice Gulch opens up to the viewer as if walking into a cathedral. Tall rock walls and a floor cluttered with massive stones. These stones strewn about rest at odd angles, which create between them crannies and caves of various sizes and depth. Trees reach up out of this temple of nature into the air above, where they create a canopy, a ceiling as fine as any painted by man. Ferns and mosses drape over the stones like lush green blankets in the summer, and then snow takes their place in the winter. But ice is known to stay deep inside the caves and crevices all through the year, making the air chilled even on the hottest summer days. There is no true trail through the gulch itself, only by it, so venturing into the space must be done carefully, especially in winter, when dangers can be hidden by snow or created by ice. Attempting to slip into any of these caves should be avoided unless properly prepared, and never done alone. I've never tried to explore inside them, only popped my head in to peer into the darkness, but that darkness offered no hint as to the depth or degree of severity. Access to Ice Gulch can be gained by hiking south along the Appalachian Trail off of Buell Lake Road in Great Barrington, near where it intersects with Deerwood Park Road. The trail will take you upward through the forest. After some time, the trail will steepen for a short distance before turning downward again to the edge of the gulch. There's a side trail that leads to the Tom Leonard Hikers Shelter. This is for Appalachian Trail through hikers' use. Do not disturb personal items left here, but if not in use, a visit to the shelter is fine. It used to be that the Appalachian Trail bypassed Ice Gulch, but in the 1990s the trail was slightly rerouted, and the land the gulch was on purchased for conservation. A lucky thing for all of us. Now to a place in Stockbridge that may sound the same, but I'll assure you is quite different. Ice Glen can be accessed 2 ways, but from Ice Glen Road is the one I prefer, and my reasoning is this: the more abrupt introduction. From this entrance one takes a thin trail from the top of a driveway, then, as if walking through a doorway into another realm, the trail takes you into a pass, the place where the slopes of a high hill and a mountainside meet, and there Ice Glen begins. The shift in scene is dramatic, unlike Ice Gulch, with its roomy height and depth. Ice Glen is more like a hallway that twists and turns among the massive and ancient stones. A path leads the hiker along this narrow space, and the rocks on each side that climb the slopes above you make one feel quite small in comparison. The trail includes some crude wooden bridges to help people across areas that are practically impassable without them. But off-trail exploration is possible, and as a kid I found many caves under the boulders that connected and made for interesting exploration, but also found some deeper, darker spaces that could have been very dangerous. And I should have suspected as such, if not for my youthful feeling of invincibility. This pass, this lingering walk, takes the explorer through so many wondrous spaces. The same sort of fern and moss growth drapes the stones as in Ice Gulch. But Ice Glen includes water features, such as stone-encircled vernal pools that collect water from the high sides of the pass. The deep crevices here are also known to hold ice all year round, making this another cool spot to escape from the hot summer days. At the far end of the path, it intersects with another. To go left will take you to the beautiful Goodrich Memorial footbridge and a parking lot at the other side, which sits at the end of Park Street. From the footbridge, stone footings can be seen that once held a bridge for trolley cars. A little building at the end of Park Street was once a ticket booth for the trolley line. The first footbridge built on this spot was constructed in 1869. It was replaced in 1895, though the construction suffered a setback when the workers tested its strength by loading it with weighty objects, and instead of holding, the bridge gave way. It was fixed, however, and not replaced again until 1936. During construction, this one fell as well, tragically killing one worker. It was fixed and finished, and is the bridge that is still there now. Back to the trail intersection. If you were to turn right, the trail would take you up to the top of the mountain, and there you'd find Laura's Tower, an observation tower that offers the climber a stunning view of the Berkshire Mountains. Ice Glen is also the home of the tallest hemlock in the state, as well as an area of old-growth forest. Ice Glen has inspired artists and poets alike. While living nearby in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, Herman Melville visited Ice Glen, at the time sometimes called Icy Glen, and wrote about it in his novel Moby Dick. He wrote, "It was a wondrous sight. The wood was green as the mosses of the icy glen. The trees stood high and haughty, feeling their living sap. The industrious earth beneath was as a weaver's loom." In her book, Old Paths and Legends of the New England Border, Connecticut, Deerfield, Berkshire, published in 1907, Catherine Mixer Abbott makes note of other notable people's interactions with this glen. She says of Nathaniel Hawthorne, "Hawthorne's final note on this memorial August 4th, 1850, reads, 'Afternoon. Under the guidance of J.T. Headley, the party scrambled through the Ice Glen.'" She continues to write, "A lively and weird scramble indeed. If Ice Glen and Laurel Hill had a sentimental guest book, then ingenious visitors might have left us a legacy of individual expressions of this most curious fissure in all Berkshire, lying concealed between Bear and Little Mountain. Veritable moss castles of gnomes and elves seem the tumbled boulders. In the twilight of the gorge. All too sunless here for lovers' tryst. Not even golden Queen Summer succeeds in erasing the chill of his majesty, the Frost King's footsteps. Yet by her command, beautiful fern clusters line the yawning black rock caverns. Away to Ice Glen, the ice dews are falling, calls blithe Fanny Kemble, and inaugurates the Stockbridge custom of startling the dryads of Ice Glen once a year by a gay invasion of humans in fantastic masquerade with ghostly torch. The first torchlight party was arranged by Dr. S.P. Parker for the amusement of his pupils. Thus ends Catherine Mixer Abbott's description of the Glen and a little of its history. Godfrey Greylock wrote in his book The Romance and Beauty of the Hills, published in 1879, the roughly wooded sides of the Glen descend abruptly to the base of the mountain, which it completely penetrates from the south to north. The bottom, an eighth of a mile long, is everywhere thickly cumbered by enormous boulders and the great trunks of fallen trees, all mossy and slippery, all piled in huge and wild confusion, so as to leave great cavernous recesses and an often impeded passage for a brawling brook. The air is dank, the shade gloomy, and the clambering arduous, so that, while attractive to the point of fascination for an occasional visit, the gorge is not a place to invite the loitering. But when, after tumbling and stumbling, climbing and sliding, over and under, and among these devil's playthings of rocks, for a mortal hour, one emerges just at sunset upon the mellow rural scene, he is prepared to welcome, ecstatically, the smiling landscape. He too writes of the parade, and says of it, "The Glen sometimes presents a scene of grotesquely picturesque delight, when some hundreds of people, with flaming torches and pealing music, and many of them in fascinating costumes, traverse the ravine at night in such broken procession as, over that crazy pathway they can, in that chasm of impervious shade, it matters little what the moon and stars may be doing on their faraway rounds. The red glare of the torches flashes from the rugged surface of the rocks to the fair faces of the ladies, never so fair as in such fitful radiance, and if, in the uncertain light, some light foot shall slip, the little shriek which announces the disaster has an invariable echo of silvery laughter. Ice Glen can be found two ways. One access can be found by crossing the footbridge at the end of Park Street, which is off of South Street in Stockbridge. The other is to instead take Ice Glen Road, which is also off of South Street. This is a very long, dead-end road that offers lovely views of the mountains to the south. A large, long, and perfectly groomed evergreen hedge, which hides an estate, will run along the road on your left. At the end of this hedge there are two driveways. The gated one is obviously not the way to Ice Glen. The other one, next to it, is. Don't drive up this driveway, though. It is owned by a private home. Instead, park kindly at the bottom, please, and do not block the driveway. Walking up this driveway can be a trek. It's long and steep, but well worth it. There's an interesting spring house you'll pass on the left as well, an old-fashioned way of keeping animals and debris from getting into the home's spring-fed water supply. At the top of the driveway, you'll see a house on the right, and on the left, a narrow, well-trodden trail. This will bring you quite quickly to Ice Glen. Wizard's Glen is in the town of Dalton, Massachusetts, in the woods off of Gulch Road. Like Ice Gulch, it's also along the Appalachian Trail, which runs the entire length of the county. Godfrey Greylock wrote in his book, The Romance and Beauty of the Hills, published in 1879, "A 4 miles' drive from our village brings the excursionist to a deep gorge, now called the Gulch, but known in the earlier and less skeptical days of the settlement as the Wizard's Glen. It is the wildest scene in our immediate neighborhood. A narrow valley is enclosed by steep hills, covered far up their sides with the huge rectangular flint rocks which mark this whole mountain range. You see them scattered everywhere, from Greylock to Taconic, but nowhere else, unless perhaps at Icy Glen or Monument Mountain, piled up in such magnificence and chaotic profusion. It is as though an angry Jove had here thrown down some impious wall of the heaven-defying Titans. Block lies heaped upon block, squared and beveled, as if by more than mortal art, for of such adamantine hardness are they that never hand nor implement of man could carve them into symmetry. In their desolation they seemed charmed by everlasting changelessness. Storm and sunshine leave few traces upon them. The trickling stream wears no channel in their obdurate surface. Only a falling thunderbolt sometimes splintered an uplifted crag, and marks its course by a scar of more livid whiteness. No flower springs from, no creeping plant clings to them for support, save when the rare herb Robert would fain cheer them with his tiny blossom, or some starveling lichen strives to shroud the livid ghastliness of their hues. It is a stern-featured place, and yet of a warm summer afternoon, it is too intensely somber for that, but a party can pass a merry hour there, in the cool depths of the ravine. This tumble of massive stones is collected along a slope. Such slopes of boulders can be found in other locations around the Berkshires too, one notable place being on Monument Mountain. But other than its beauty, Wizard's Glen is special for a certain legend. For some time, the early settlers believed that this place was the location of the rituals of ancient native medicine men, where they'd practice their potions and devotions, and even human sacrifice. The story is that sometime around 1770, a Dalton man named John Chamberlain was out near this place hunting. He was lucky and did indeed kill a deer. He began to transport his prize back home when a strange storm rolled in. In the glen he knew were boulders that might provide shelter from the rain and wind, so he dragged the deer there. He found a suitable alcove and hid himself and his kill away. But the storm continued, and the day turned to night. Lightning occasionally flickered across the sky, and thunder echoed tremendously across the glen, a place already well known for echoes. John tried to sleep, but couldn't seem to settle. Something felt wrong, but he couldn't figure out just what. As the feeling grew, he peered out from his hiding spot across the boulder-strewn clearing, and there could see what he thought were figures. He strained to see in the darkness, but another flicker of lightning assured him that he was not just seeing things. There came from the forest what appeared to be a row of demons of sorts, with hooves and tails. The lot of them began to dance bizarrely, and then from the darkness came another, larger, winged demon, perhaps even the devil himself. John backed a little further into his cave, clutching his musket, trying to hide himself. But he didn't retreat so far that he couldn't see. The group gathered around one of the larger, flatter stones that he presumed served them as an altar. Through the pouring rain, a man, a native, leapt up upon the stone, from seemingly nowhere. He wore the traditional garb of his people, but was painted in war paint, and he whooped fiercely. The demons and devil gathered there seemed to respond to this native man, seemed to obey. The man's hand darted out from his side toward the woods, and from the tree line rushed more demons, dragging with them a native woman. She was thrown upon the altar. Around her the demons reached inward and held her down by her limbs, and the man, standing over her, drew an axe and swung it quickly aloft. John, having slowly ventured closer to the opening of his hiding place, eyes wide with amazement, shuddered when the woman's fearful eyes found his. John in an instant found his resolve, and was certain he had to do something to save her. But instead of grabbing for his musket, his hand delved into his pocket, and he staggered out into the open, his footing uncertain, as he hurried over the slick stones. A bolt of lightning lit the sky overhead as he thrust his fist high. As he ran toward the scene, clutching in it his Bible. With all the voice he could muster, he shouted the name of God. In a heartbeat and colossal clap of thunder, the entirety of it vanished. The demons, the devil, the man, the struggling woman, all of them. And John was left alone. Just him, the glen, and the rain. He wondered about the woman, worried for her. Her scream echoed in his memory, but knowing he could do no more, he returned to the little cave that had been his hiding place and shelter. He sat at the mouth of it for a long moment, cold and confused. Had that really happened? Could it have been a dream? Perhaps he'd fallen asleep and had only now sat up. But when the lightning flickered and brightened his cave for just a moment, he saw, too, that the deer he'd killed was gone. He grabbed his musket and left. As he hurried home, the storm let up, and daylight broke slowly over the mountains. He told his family and his friends about what had happened that night, but he never saw the like of it again. This story is certainly dramatic, but it suffers from a problem common to early New England legends: the vilification and bedeviling of native peoples to elevate the apparent morality of the invading white Christians. There really is a stone in Wizard's Glen called the altar, and it does seem to be stained with red as though it were blood. However, this is instead evidence of iron in the stone, and early settlers would have probably known that, being used to making much of their own goods from scratch, including their own tools, from the metals in the local earth. And there really was a man called John Chamberlain, who did live in Dalton. However, he wasn't alive yet in 1770. He was born in 1835, and I wasn't able to find any record of anyone with the last name Chamberlain living in Dalton before that. It may have been that John Chamberlain told this story at some date, and those who heard it later confused the name of the main character with that of John himself. But true or not, the story is indeed interesting to think about. And the Glen certainly does have an air of magic. It stirs in visitors a strange need to imagine amazing things. Gulch Road can be found off of Park Street, and Park Street can be located beside the cemetery on Main Street in Dalton. Each one of these rocky and rugged places are amazing in their own unique ways, and well worth the hike or drive to get there. But be careful, and don't forget a camera, because you'll want pictures to show your friends. It's more likely than not, you'll be taking them there when you go back again, because when it comes to these places, it's hard to stay away. This has been The Berkshires Gone By. Created, written, directed, and read by myself, Brooke Grenier. and co-produced by Deanna Garner. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, where you can see many, many pictures from Berkshire history. You can find more of our episodes on Facebook and by visiting www.theberkshiresgoneby.com. There, you can also find more specific images related to each episode. We hope you'll join us for our next episode. Thanks for listening.